Reflecting on the past, I realize I might have missed some clear warning signs. Being in love can sometimes make you overlook the red flags that your intuition is desperately trying to show you. My name is Penny, and this is the tale of how I met my husband, John, and his family. John and I were both software developers at TechZone Solutions. He stood out not just because of his good looks, but also for his calm confidence, a stark contrast to other colleagues who seemed to only talk about coding. One morning, he stopped by my desk, offering me a cup of coffee, and casually asked, "Did you catch the new episode of Black Mirror last night?" That marked the beginning of it all. We started with small talks about common interests, which gradually evolved into deeper connections. We both enjoyed sci-fi and weekend hikes, and even shared a love for silly B-movies. Our lunch breaks became longer, and casual coffee runs turned into dinner dates. A year into our relationship, John suggested I meet his family. They're very down-to-earth, he reassured me as we drove to his mother's house. His sister Addison, along with her husband Ethan and their son Logan, also lived there. The house was modest but tidy, with children's toys strewn across the yard. Addison greeted us at the door, her son in her arms, and quickly pulled John into a hug. "Mom, they're here," she called out. Kennedy, John's mother, emerged from the kitchen with a warm smile and an apron. "There's my successful son," she beamed, embracing him before turning to greet me warmly. "And you must be Penny. John has told us so much about you." During dinner, the family dynamics seemed normal enough, and they appeared genuinely proud of John's professional accomplishments. However, something felt slightly off, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was until Addison mentioned Logan's upcoming birthday. "John," she began with pleading eyes, "Logan really wants that new Nintendo game with the dinosaurs." Before John could respond, his mother interjected, "Let him spoil his nephew a bit. He's doing so well at his tech job." She chuckled, patting John's hand. Then, turning to me with a seemingly light-hearted smile, she added, "I just hope after you two get married, he won't forget he still has a mother and sister to look after." Everyone laughed it off, but I didn't grasp then that her words were far from a joke. 7 months later, John and I were married in a modest ceremony and moved into a cozy apartment near our workplace. I thought we were embarking on our perfect new life together. However, the bliss was short-lived. Almost immediately after our honeymoon, requests for financial help began to flood in, first from Addison for Logan's school supplies, then from Kennedy for home repairs. The demands seemed endless, and John always responded by opening his wallet. At first, I overlooked it because the amounts were small and John earned well, but soon it felt like a continuous drain. $210 here for $120 there, each week bringing a new urgent expense that only John could resolve. One evening, while we were washing dishes, I decided it was time to address this. "Hun," I began tentatively, "can we talk about something important?" He looked at me, hands covered in soap suds. "Sure, what's on your mind?" It was then I brought up the financial help he was continuously providing his family. I noticed John's shoulders tense slightly as I brought up my concerns. "Don't you think it's becoming a bit too much?" I asked, noticing his flushed face as he dried his hands. I know, John replied, a bit sheepishly. "I've always helped them ever since I got my first job, but your mom receives a decent pension," I pointed out gently, "and Addison has Ethan. Shouldn't he be supporting his own families?" John let out a heavy sigh and leaned back against the kitchen counter. "Ethan, well, he hasn't worked in over a year." "What?" I nearly dropped the dish I was drying. "Why not?" "He quits every job he lands," John explained, his frustration evident as he ran his fingers through his hair. "There's always something. Either the work is too tough, the boss is unfair, or the commute is too long. There's always an excuse." I set down the dish towel and faced John directly. "I love how caring you are towards your family, but we need to think about our future as well. We want to buy a house, right? Maybe start our own family." He nodded in agreement. "Then we need to prioritize our own needs," I continued softly, taking his hand. "It's wonderful to support your mom and sister, but not at the expense of our dreams." John was silent for a long moment, absent-mindedly playing with my fingers. Finally, he looked up. "You're right. We should be saving for our future." What if we set up a separate savings account for the house? We can put a fixed amount in there every month and not touch it for any reason. That sounds perfect, I replied, relieved he understood. We spent the rest of the evening planning our saving strategy, and for the first time since our wedding, I felt like we were truly united in our plans for the future. 3 months into our new savings plan, Kennedy invited us over for Sunday dinner. Despite my reservations, John reassured me. "They're still family," he said, squeezing my hand as we drove there. The atmosphere was tense from the moment we arrived. Addison set the table with sharp, hurried movements while Ethan lounged on the couch, absorbed in his phone. Kennedy's smile seemed forced as she greeted John and barely acknowledged me. Dinner began with awkward small talk about the weather and Kennedy's garden. I played with the meatloaf on my plate, anticipating the inevitable. Soon enough, Kennedy turned to John with a sweetly veiled tone. "John, honey, I noticed you haven't sent any money these past 3 months. Is everything okay at work?" The sound of forks clattering against plates filled the brief silence. All eyes were on us. John cleared his throat and straightened his posture, a sign he was nervous, but ready to stand firm. "Actually, Mom," he began, his voice steady, "Penny and I are saving up to buy a house. We're planning to start our own family soon." A deafening silence followed. Kennedy's fork clattered loudly against her plate as she set it down, her eyes drilling into me. Addison's cheeks flushed with anger, and I could sense the storm was about to break. "A house." Addison's voice cracked. "While I'm here, pregnant with my second child, struggling to afford prenatal vitamins. Do you know how expensive baby things are?" I felt my frustration mounting. After months of biting my tongue, it was becoming increasingly difficult to hold back. I couldn't hold back any longer. "Maybe your husband should think about that," I retorted, nodding towards Ethan, who was still buried in his phone. Addison's face crumpled as she burst into tears. "How dare you? You're so cruel," she sobbed. "You don't understand our situation," Ethan finally chimed in, looking up from his phone with a defensive tone. "I'm trying here. Do you know how hard it is to find a good job these days? And I'm dealing with depression." Something in me snapped. "Depression didn't stop you from deciding to have another baby, did it?" The room immediately erupted into chaos. Addison's wails grew louder, and Ethan began to defend his job search efforts, but it was Kennedy's voice that dominated the room. "You," she pointed accusingly at me, her face twisted in anger, "are trying to turn my son against his own family. We were happy before you came along with your selfish ideas." "Selfish." I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Wanting to build a future with my husband is selfish?" I argued back. "Mom." "Stop," John interjected, but Kennedy continued her tirade. "She's poisoning your mind against us, your mother and sister. How dare she dictate who we can receive help from?" Unable to bear any more, I grabbed my purse and walked out, John close on my heels. We drove home in silence, Kennedy's angry shouts still ringing in my ears. As we pulled into our apartment complex, the streetlights flickered past, reflecting my turmoil. Finally, John broke the silence, his voice soft yet conflicted. "You were right," he admitted, "about everything. But maybe we need to be more gentle with them. They won't change overnight." I looked at him, seeing the turmoil etched across his face. Part of me wanted to argue that his family didn't deserve our gentleness and needed a firm reality check, but seeing his pained expression, I simply nodded. The fallout from our dinner confrontation soon spilled over into social media. Addison began posting daily, heart-wrenching updates about her struggles. "Struggling to afford prenatal vitamins for my baby," one post read, showing a picture of an empty wallet. Another post displayed a barren grocery cart with the caption, "Having to cut back on groceries this month. How will we manage with another on the way?" Each post was more dramatic than the last, with pictures of Logan looking forlorn next to empty toy store windows and lengthy paragraphs about the importance of family support. Subtle digs were made about some people who had their priorities wrong. John was glued to his phone, his expression growing more strained with each notification. One evening, after noticing how quiet he had become, I found him staring at a photo Addison posted of Logan's worn-out shoes. You can send her something, I suggested gently, touching his shoulder. Just small amounts, but let's keep our savings plan intact. The relief on his face was palpable. John began sending a modest monthly amount to Addison, and as if by magic, the tragic social media posts began to decrease, though they never stopped completely. Kennedy resumed extending dinner invitations, though the atmosphere remained chilly. "Would you like more potatoes, John?" she would ask warmly, then give me a cold glance as if I were invisible. Addison spoke to her brother as if I wasn't there, pointedly asking, "I wonder if your wife would mind passing the salt," while staring at the ceiling. I endured it all, knowing that navigating this family dynamic was part of our journey together. Despite the challenges, John and I remained committed to our future, slowly navigating the delicate balance between supporting his family and building our own life together. While Kennedy and Addison were giving me the cold shoulder, something incredible happened at work. TechZone secured a massive contract with Global Tech, one of the biggest names in the industry. John and I had both played key roles in clinching the deal, and our rewards were significant. Our combined income nearly doubled. With our new financial comfort, we continued living modestly but indulged in a few luxuries. We bought a new hybrid SUV to replace John's old sedan and enjoyed occasional weekend getaways to the coast. As our savings account swelled, our dreams expanded. We began browsing real estate listings, discussing potential neighborhoods, and planning more seriously for our future. For the first time since our marriage, it felt like we were truly advancing. However, family dinners remained tense. During one such dinner, Kennedy decided to confront us. I was quietly eating my pot roast, trying to tune out the usual coldness, when Kennedy dramatically cleared her throat. "I saw your vacation photos on Facebook," she began, fixing me with a stern look. "Palm Springs, wasn't it? That resort looked expensive." I felt John tense beside me. Here we go again, I thought to myself. Kennedy continued, criticizing with a tone full of disapproval. "Those infinity pools, luxury spa treatments. Really, John, it's not appropriate to flaunt such a lifestyle when your sister is struggling with 2 children." The irony was palpable as Kennedy spoke. In the background, the clicking of computer keys provided a steady rhythm. Ethan was at his desk, engrossed in his latest video game, the 3rd new release he'd bought that month. I couldn't resist commenting. "Speaking of making ends meet," I said, gesturing towards Ethan, "there are plenty of job openings in tech support at our company. The pay is good, and the benefits are excellent." The clicking stopped momentarily, then resumed louder. Addison's face turned a familiar shade of red. "You have no idea what it's like," she snapped. "Try being a mother of 2 before you judge us." "Oh, wait, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" The barb stung, but I maintained a neutral expression. Ethan continued his game, apparently oblivious to the tension. I could have argued that motherhood was Addison's choice, just like having a second child while unemployed was their decision. I could have mentioned how Ethan's gaming expenses could cover the prenatal vitamins she often lamented about on Facebook. I could have ignited another argument, but instead, I just shook my head and took another bite of pot roast. Later that night, as John and I drove home, I reflected on the monthly transfers he still made to his sister's account. The amounts weren't small. They could have furnished an entire room in our future home. But our increased salaries allowed us to manage these expenses without hindering our financial goals. Sometimes, maintaining peace comes with a cost, and for now, we can afford it. Over time, Addison's requests transformed from subtle hints to outright demands, presenting full-blown gift registries for every occasion: Christmas, Easter, birthdays, and even Mother's Day, each accompanied by a list of pricey items she wanted for herself and the kids. "John, look at this," I said one evening, showing him the latest email from his sister. It was a Christmas list that included designer clothes, the latest iPad, and premium toys that cost more than our monthly car payment. John sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I'll talk to her," he promised. "This is getting ridiculous." But when John called Addison to explain that we were already providing significant monthly support, her reaction was immediate and dramatic. I could hear her shrill voice piercing through the phone. "I'll tell Mom you care more about your wife's feelings than your own family's needs." Watching John struggle with these confrontations became too much for me. One evening, while John was in the shower, I took the initiative to address the situation. I opened the email from Addison outlining her latest extravagant gift demands and started making edits. The $900 designer purse was switched to a $500 alternative, and the $1,200 iPad was downgraded to a $700 tablet. In fact, I have the price of every item on the list. Here, I said, showing John the revised list. This is what we're doing. He looked uncertain. Addison won't be happy, he murmured. Addison's never happy, I pointed out, but this is still very generous. When the gifts arrived, the reaction was as expected. Addison called John crying, and Kennedy left a scathing voicemail accusing us of sending cheap knockoffs. At the next family dinner, both shot daggers at me with their eyes. I just don't understand why you couldn't get the items I specifically requested, Addison sniffled. I offered her my sweetest smile. Oh, but didn't you know? It's not about the price tag. It's the thought that counts. We put a lot of thought into choosing these alternatives. The look she gave me could have curdled milk. A year of passive-aggressive gift-giving and tense dinners later, we arrived at the Easter gathering that would change everything. Addison stood up at the table with a radiantly smug expression. I have wonderful news, she announced. We're expecting baby number 3. The fork stopped halfway to my mouth, and I felt John stiffen beside me. A third child, with no income and no home of their own. My mind raced with the potential increase in our family support payments. Ethan, predictably, didn't look up from his phone. Kennedy, however, was ecstatic. Oh, my darling, she cried, embracing Addison. This is wonderful news. 3 beautiful grandchildren. Then, turning to me with a glint of malice in her eyes, she said, You should take notes, Penny. Addison is such a wonderful example of a real woman. Here she is, about to have her 3rd child, and you still haven't given John any. The room went silent, everyone's eyes on me. I placed my fork down carefully, ensuring my voice was steady when I spoke. I believe in doing things in the right order, I said coolly. First, build a stable foundation like having our own home and being able to provide for our children without depending on handouts. Then start a family. Kennedy and Addison exchanged looks before bursting into artificial laughter. Oh, Penny, Kennedy said condescendingly, you're so corporate. It isn't about money and houses. No, I agreed, taking a sip of water. It's about responsibility. The tension at the table was palpable, but I didn't care anymore. Let them laugh. Let them think I was cold and calculating. At least my future children would have a secure home, something no one could take away. Addison's 3rd baby arrived in September, another boy. Meanwhile, John and I had achieved our savings goal. After months of house hunting, we found our dream home. A beautiful 2-story colonial with 5 bedrooms, a spacious backyard, and a kitchen that inspired me to want to cook. It was located in an excellent school district, just a 15-minute drive from work. We spent weeks planning renovations, picking paint colors, and choosing furniture, with each room holding the promise of a brighter future, including a sunny bedroom that would make the perfect nursery. In a twist that seemed straight out of a suspenseful drama, while we were exploring and planning each detail of our dream home, from the sunny playroom to the cozy home office, an unexpected invitation from Kennedy landed like a storm cloud. John relayed the message with a hesitant tone, glancing up from his phone. Mom insists we come over tonight for dinner. She says it's important. There was a strange unease in his voice that set off alarm bells in my mind. As we arrived at Kennedy's house, the atmosphere was electric with an unusual tension. The entire family was there, Kennedy, Addison, Ethan, and all the kids, each emanating a peculiar, almost triumphant vibe. Addison seemed especially agitated, barely able to keep still, while Kennedy sported that all-knowing smile that had always made me wary. Once we were all seated around the dinner table, Kennedy wasted no time. Congratulations are in order, I hear, she began, with a tone that felt too rehearsed. You too bought a house, how wonderful. Yes, we just closed last week, I responded, riding the wave of our recent achievement. It's really perfect for... Kennedy cut me off mid-sentence, her hands clasped together as if she were about to broker a major deal. That's actually why we wanted to talk tonight. You see, you and John don't really need a big house yet, no kids and all. Staying in your apartment would be just fine for now. My smile stiffened, sensing where this was going. But Addison here, Kennedy continued, her voice dripping with concocted sympathy. Poor thing, with 3 kids in this cramped space. They need more room, a backyard to play in. Then, dropping the charade of subtlety, she laid it out. We think it would be best if you gave your new house to Addison and her family. The room seemed to freeze around me as I waited for someone to laugh and reveal the joke. But Kennedy's face was dead serious, and Addison was nodding vigorously. Even Ethan looked up from his phone, intrigued. "Excuse me?" I finally uttered, disbelief clouding my voice. "You want us to just hand over the house we worked years to afford? I'm a mother of 3. Addison chimed in, as if that were the only credential needed to claim ownership of our home. "I deserve to give my kids a proper home. You guys can get another place later." I turned to John, my pulse racing. "Can you believe this? Do you see the entitlement here?" Before John could reply, Kennedy's voice oozed false sweetness. "John knows his duty. He was raised to take care of his family. That was the last straw." John's hand slammed down on the table, causing the silverware to jump. Rising from his seat, his face a mask of controlled fury, he finally let loose. "Enough," he barked. Kennedy and Addison recoiled, their smugness replaced by surprise. "I'm done watching you 2 manipulate every situation to your advantage," John declared, his voice echoing off the walls. "You," he pointed at Ethan, "get off your backside and stop gaming. I'm tired of financing your laziness. And I'm sick of hearing you," he now turned to Addison, "complain and guilt-trip us. And Mom, no more. I'm not your personal bank." Addison started to retort, but John overpowered her. "No, you don't get to speak right now. After all the money and support I've given, now you demand our home? It's not happening." Kennedy tried to sweet-talk him back to compliance, but John was resolute. "Don't sweetie me, Mom. If this is what you call raising me right, then yes, you did. Right enough for me to see through this toxic mess." With that, he grabbed my hand, pulling me to my feet. "We're done here. No more money, no more handouts, no more manipulation. This is where it stops." And with those final words, we walked out, leaving a stunned silence behind us. The drive home was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, filled with relief and the promise of a new beginning, free from the chains of familial guilt and manipulation. John erupted in frustration, his voice loud and clear. "Taking care of the children Addison started crying over should be your and Ethan's responsibility, not mine, not Penny's, yours." Clutching my hand, he steered me toward the exit. "Don't call us, don't text, and spare us your endless demands. We're done." As we departed, I caught a last glimpse of their faces, shocked and immobile with disbelief. John hurried us to the car, helping me in before he himself slid into the driver's seat. As we drove off, I couldn't resist. I pulled him close and kissed him passionately. "I love you," I murmured, my words brushing his lips. "I'm so proud of you," I added. He embraced me tightly, and I sensed a slight tremble in him. "I should have stood up to them years ago," he confessed, regret tinged in his tone. "I'm sorry it took me so long." In the weeks that followed, Kennedy and Addison bombarded us with calls and messages, swinging wildly between tears and anger. Even distant relatives chimed in, accusing us of cruelty. But John remained resolute, severing ties on social media and blocking their numbers. Together, we turned our attention to our new home, painting walls, picking out furniture, and starting a garden. Each day, I saw John become lighter, the burden of manipulation lifting off his shoulders. One quiet morning, as we sat in our bright kitchen sipping coffee and discussing plans to transform a bedroom into a nursery, John reached for my hand. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice filled with gratitude. "For helping me find my courage, for showing me what a real family feels like, and for your patience while I figured everything out." Now, as I relax in the comfort of our warm living room, a smile naturally finds its way to my face. The truth is, the family you start with isn't always the family you find yourself with. Sometimes you need to build your own family piece by piece, dream by dream, one day at a time. Arrayed before me on the coffee table are various paint samples for the nursery, signaling the exciting steps ahead. Tomorrow, we have our initial consultation with a fertility specialist. Life may not be flawless, but it is genuinely ours, and that's truly what counts.